The morning sun filtered through the massive arched windows of Malfoy Manor, casting long, golden geometric shapes across the marble floor of the east wing. It was quiet. A good kind of quiet. The kind Draco Malfoy had spent the last 2 decades building, brick by painful brick. He stood by the mahogany dining table, adjusting his cuffs. Silver cufflinks. Immaculate tailoring. His reflection in the tall mirror showed the aristocrat he was born to be, but the reality was far sharper. He had spent his life surviving, and this house was the only place he could finally put his guard down. He heard her footsteps before she entered the room. The familiar, quick pace that always meant she was already running through her mental checklist for the day. Hermione walked in. Her wild curls were pulled back into an uncompromising knot. She carried a stack of ministry files under one arm and a half-eaten piece of toast in her free hand. She stopped in the doorway. Looked up. Found him. "You're distracted," she said. "I am admiring." Draco corrected. His voice was a low, dry drawl. "You're admiring me while I'm late and trying to find my reading glasses. They're on your head, Granger." She stopped. Reached up. Found the glasses exactly where he said they were. She pulled them down, giving him a flat look over the rims. "You could have said something 5 minutes ago." She pointed out. "And miss watching you tear the library apart?" Draco smirked. "Never. It's the highlight of my morning. You were practically threatening the bookshelves with bodily harm." "I was not threatening them. I was politely suggesting they release my belongings." She crossed the room. She didn't stop until she was right in front of him. Close enough that he could smell her shampoo. Vanilla and old parchment. He didn't move. He never moved away from her. "The books don't listen to polite suggestions, Hermione," he said. "They listen to authority. You have to command them. I am the Deputy Minister for Magic. I command plenty." "Yes, but the Manor's library is notoriously elitist. It only respects purebloods and people who don't eat toast over first editions. I didn't drop a single crumb. I saw 3. She reached out. Her fingers brushed his lapel, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle. "You're insufferable," she said. "You married me." A temporary lapse in judgment. 20 years is a long lapse. Her mouth twitched. She leaned up. Kissed the corner of his jaw. Draco's hand came up instantly. His fingers wrapped around her wrist. Not tight. Just grounding himself. He did it without thinking. He always did it. "Good morning," she murmured against his skin. "Good morning," he replied. The dry drawl was entirely gone. This was their sanctuary. They had fought a war, lied to everyone they knew, and built this life out of the ashes of their former worlds. Nobody outside this house knew the real truth of what they had done. And that was exactly how Draco liked it. Footsteps clattered down the grand staircase, breaking the stillness. Heavy, uncoordinated steps that belonged to a teenager. Scorpius appeared first. 15. Blonde. Moving with the loose-limbed energy of a boy who had never had to look over his shoulder. Rose was right behind him. 14. A terrifying mix of Draco's sharp features and Hermione's fierce eyes. Draco dropped Hermione's wrist. He took half a step back, slipping seamlessly into the role of the composed patriarch. "Morning," Scorpius announced. He threw himself into a chair at the long table. Is there food? I'm starving. If we only have those terrible oat things again, I'm going to launch a protest. Good morning to you too, darling, Hermione said. She stepped away from Draco, moving to the sideboard to pour coffee. And the oat things are perfectly healthy. They taste like cardboard, Mum. They build character, Draco said, taking his seat at the head of the table. Something you severely lack, given your current slouch. Scorpius sat up straighter, though he rolled his eyes. My character is fine. It's my stomach that's suffering. Rose didn't sit. She stood at the end of the table, her posture rigid. She was holding a heavy, leather-bound book. Draco recognized it instantly. It was the standard history of magic textbook from Hogwarts. The new edition. The heavily sanctioned edition. Yes, Rosie? Hermione asked, her back still turned as she reached for the milk. We were doing our essay on the post-war reconstruction. Rose said. Her voice was too careful. Too measured. Draco stopped reaching for his tea. And? Hermione prompted, turning around with 2 mugs of coffee. And it says here that the Malfoy family was pardoned because of a strategic alliance with the Order. Rose set the book down. It hit the table with a heavy thud. But it doesn't say what the alliance was. It just says critical intelligence was provided. That's a massive gap in the historical record. Silence. The quiet in the room changed. It wasn't the warm, peaceful silence of a Sunday morning anymore. It was the sharp, thin silence of ice cracking underfoot. Draco looked at Hermione. Hermione looked at Draco. Across the length of the dining table, an entire conversation happened in the span of 3 seconds. Tell them. Hermione's eyes said. Absolutely not. Draco's jaw hardened. They're asking. They're children. They're old enough to understand nuance. I won't let them look at us like that. Hermione broke the gaze first. She set the coffee mugs down. Her hands were perfectly steady. The textbooks are oversimplified, Rose. Hermione said. Her tone was casual. Too casual. The reconstruction was a chaotic time. The alliances were complicated. Complicated how? Scorpius asked. He was watching them now. He wasn't complaining about the oat things anymore. Draco moved. He stood up. Complicated. Draco said, his voice flat and commanding, in that it involved legal and political maneuvers that are incredibly boring for anyone under the age of 30. Eat your breakfast, Scorpius. Scorpius blinked. I'm just asking a question. And I am giving you an answer. Draco's tone brooked no argument. The history books are written by bureaucrats trying to summarize decades of conflict into neat little paragraphs. Don't waste your weekend obsessing over them. Rose narrowed her eyes. She had inherited that piercing, analytical look directly from him. Theo says you two basically ran the shadow government for 3 years. Rose said. Draco swore internally. He was going to murder Not. Slowly. Theo exaggerates, Hermione said smoothly. You know how he is. He likes to make things sound much more dramatic than they actually were. He said you had a secret correspondence, Rose pressed. She wasn't letting it go. That there are letters. Draco's blood ran cold. The letters. The encrypted journals. The things they had buried deep in the wards of the manor, down in the cellar vaults where no one could ever find them. The things that held the real story of how Draco had sold out his side to keep Hermione alive. The brutal, terrifying things they had done to win. The lines they had crossed. He looked at Hermione again. Her hand was gripping the edge of the sideboard. Her knuckles were white against the dark wood. "There are no letters," Draco said. He didn't blink. He lied with the smooth, practiced ease of a man who had done it to survive a madman. "Theo is winding you up because he finds it amusing. It's his favorite pastime." Rose studied him. She didn't believe him. Scorpius picked up his fork, but his eyes darted between his parents. The tension in the room was too thick to ignore. Hermione finally let go of the sideboard. She walked over to Draco. She didn't look at the kids. She looked at him. She reached up. She smoothed his collar. Her signature tell. The thing she did right before she delivered a hard truth, or right before she walked into a battle. "We should get going," Hermione said softly. "The ministry won't run itself. And you have that meeting with the International Confederation." "Right." Draco's voice was tight. He didn't touch her wrist this time. He just turned and walked out of the room. Hermione followed him. They didn't speak until they were in the entryway, the heavy oak doors closed behind them. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Draco stopped. He turned to face her. "Not is a dead man," Draco said. "Draco, I will personally hex him into the next century. I will turn him into a ferret and feed him to the peacocks." "They're going to keep digging," Hermione said. She didn't shout. Her voice was quiet, and that was worse. "You know they are. Rose is exactly like you. She won't let a puzzle go unsolved." "She's like you," Draco snapped. "Relentless. Obsessive. Refusing to leave well enough alone. And Scorpius sees everything." Hermione added, "He knows we're lying." Draco closed his eyes. He leaned back against the heavy wood of the door. The aristocratic mask slipped, just for a second. He looked incredibly tired. The years of carrying their secrets suddenly visible. "I can't, Granger. We can't hide it forever." "Yes, we can." He opened his eyes. They were fierce. Desperate. "I spent my entire life being the villain in everyone else's story. I am not going to be the villain in my children's story. Let them think I was a good man. Let me have that one thing." Hermione just watched him. She stepped closer. She didn't smooth his collar this time. She put her hand flat against his chest, right over his heart. "You were a good man." She said fiercely. "You saved me. I let people die, Hermione. To save me. And they'll hate me for it. They'll look at me and see what the rest of the world sees. They are our children," she said. Her voice cracked, just a little. "They won't hate you. They could never hate you. You don't know that. I know you." Draco covered her hand with his own. He pressed it harder against his chest, as if trying to push her warmth straight into his ribs. "I won't tell them," he said. The finality in his voice was absolute. "And neither will you. We burn the journals tonight." Hermione didn't argue. She didn't agree, either. She just looked at him, her eyes dark with a fear she wouldn't name. "We have to go to work," she said softly. Draco nodded. He let her hand go. They apparat to the ministry, leaving the quiet manor behind. But the silence they left in their wake wasn't peaceful anymore. It was a countdown. Part 2. The discovery the wards around the manor did not just alert Draco to intruders. They were tied to his blood. When something was breached, he didn't hear an alarm. He felt a sharp, cold tug behind his ribs. He was standing in his study, pouring a measure of Ogden's old fire whiskey, when the tug hit him. He froze. The crystal decanter clinked against the glass. The breach wasn't at the perimeter. It was inside the house. Down in the cellar vaults. The journals. Draco dropped the glass. It shattered on the Persian rug, amber liquid soaking into the wool. He didn't look back. He was out the door and moving down the corridor before the sound of breaking glass faded. He took the grand staircase 3 steps at a time. His wand was already in his hand. He didn't remember drawing it. He reached the cellar doors. The heavy iron locks hung open. The protective runes etched into the stone frame were glowing a dull, angry red. Someone had bypassed them. Not forced them. Bypassed them. Draco descended the stone steps into the dark. The air down here was cold and smelled of damp earth and old magic. "I told you." A voice echoed off the stone walls. It was Rose. The secondary arithmancy sequence was a dicker. "I didn't think he'd actually use a bloodlocked ward." Scorpius replied. His voice sounded tight. Nervous. "Mum said those were dangerous. Mum says a lot of things." Rose muttered. Draco rounded the corner of the wine racks. He stopped dead. Scorpius and Rose were standing in the center of the vault. Between them, resting on an old wooden crate, was a black iron box. It was covered in heavy, interlocking latches. Rose had her wand pointed at the center latch. Scorpius was reading from a piece of parchment. "Step away from the box," Draco said. His voice didn't echo. It didn't boom. It was deadly quiet. It was the voice he used when he was in a room full of politicians and wanted them to know he could ruin them with a single signature. Scorpius jumped. He dropped the parchment. Rose didn't jump. She turned around slowly, her wand lowering but not completely dropping. She met her father's eyes. "You lied to us." Rose said. "I told you to step away from the box," Draco repeated. He didn't yell. The terrifying calm in his voice made Scorpius take a very quick step back. Rose held her ground. "Theo wasn't winding us up. You did have a secret correspondence. What's in here?" "Nothing that concerns you." "If it doesn't concern us, why is it locked behind blood magic?" Rose challenged. Her chin lifted. The exact same way Hermione's did when she was preparing for a fight. "Because it is mine," Draco said, taking a slow step forward. "And you do not have permission to touch it." Dad Scorpius started. "Go to your rooms. Both of you." "No. We are not children anymore," Rose snapped. "You are acting exactly like children." Draco shot back. The cold facade was cracking. The panic was clawing its way up his throat. If she opened that box, if she saw what he had written, What he had done. You broke into a sealed vault. You bypassed wards that could have severely injured you. Go upstairs. Not until you tell us what this is. Rose insisted. She placed her hand flat on the top of the iron box. Draco raised his wand. He didn't want to. He didn't even think about it. It was pure instinct. The instinct of a man backed into a corner with his most shameful secrets exposed. Scorpius saw the wand. His eyes went wide. Draco! Stop! Hermione's voice cut through the damp air like a blade. Draco didn't lower his wand, but his arm went completely still. Hermione walked out from the shadows of the stairs. She was still wearing her work robes. Her hair was falling out of its knot. She looked at the iron box. Then she looked at the wand in Draco's hand. Put it down, she said quietly. They broke the wards, Draco said. His voice sounded strained, even to his own ears. I know, Hermione said. She walked past him. She didn't look at his wand again. She walked straight up to Rose and Scorpius. Go upstairs. Mum, we just want to know Scorpius tried. I said, go upstairs. Hermione didn't shout either, but the absolute authority in her tone left no room for debate. Rose looked like she wanted to argue. She looked at the box, then at Hermione. Hermione met her daughter's gaze and held it. Unblinking. Unyielding. Rose finally dropped her hand from the box. She turned and walked toward the stairs. Scorpius followed, casting one last, terrified look at his father. The heavy cellar door clicked shut at the top of the stairs. They were alone. Draco slowly lowered his wand. His hand was shaking. He shoved the wand into his pocket and turned away from the box, pacing a tight circle on the stone floor. How did she break the ward? Draco demanded. He couldn't look at Hermione. It was a modified sequence. Only you and I know the counterspell. She's brilliant, Hermione said simply. She's your daughter. She is entirely too much like you. Draco stopped pacing. He looked at the iron box. It sat there, black and menacing, a physical manifestation of everything he hated about himself. I'm going to burn it, Draco said. No, you aren't. I will burn it to ash and scatter it in the ocean. Draco stepped toward the box. I should have done it 20 years ago. Hermione moved faster. She stepped between him and the crate, blocking his path. Move, Hermione. I won't. They cannot see what is in there, Draco said, his voice rising, the panic finally breaking through. Do you understand? They cannot read those journals. They already know they exist, Hermione said. Her voice was infuriatingly calm. Burning them won't erase the questions. It will only confirm that we are hiding something terrible. We are hiding something terrible, Draco shouted. The sound bounced off the stone walls. I'm hiding something terrible. You were the saint. I was the monster who sold out his own blood to keep you breathing. You were not a monster. I killed people, Hermione. You passed intelligence, which led to deaths. Deaths I orchestrated. Deaths I stood by and watched. Draco dragged both hands through his hair. He looked completely unraveled. The impeccable aristocrat was gone. If they read those pages, if they see what I wrote, what I felt when I did it, they will never look at me the same way again." Hermione watched him. Her eyes were dark with an old, familiar sorrow. "I'll obliviate them," Draco said suddenly. He looked up, his eyes wild. "Just the last hour. I can modify the memory. I'll make them think they couldn't break the ward and gave up." Hermione's face went rigid. "Do not say that," she said. Her voice dropped an octave. It was a warning. "It's a simple charm, Granger. It won't hurt them. You will not use memory magic on our children." The words were clipped. Precise. Lethal. "It's to protect them. It is to protect you." Hermione snapped back. Her composure broke. "It is to protect your image in their heads. Do not dress your cowardice up as fatherly concern." Draco flinched. The words hit him like physical blows. They stared at each other. The silence stretched, vibrating with 20 years of unspoken tension. This was the fight they had never had. The argument they had meticulously avoided every single day since the war ended. "You think I'm a coward," Draco whispered. "I think you are terrified," Hermione corrected, her voice softening just a fraction. "And you have been terrified for 20 years. But you cannot protect them from the world by lying to them about how it was built. They will hate me." "They won't. You can't promise that," Draco shouted, stepping closer to her. "You don't know what it's like. They look at you and they see a hero. They look at me and they see a reformed man. If they read those journals, they'll just see the Death Eater everyone always said I was." Hermione didn't back away. She stood her ground. She always stood her ground against him. She reached out. She placed her hands on either side of his face. Her palms were warm against his cold skin. Draco's breath hitched. His hands came up, grabbing her wrists, not to pull her away, but to anchor himself. He gripped her hard. Desperate. "They will see," Hermione said, looking directly into his panicked eyes, a man who did unspeakable things to save the people he loved. "They will see someone who sacrificed his soul so they could grow up in a world that wasn't burning." Draco shook his head slowly, squeezing his eyes shut. "I can't do it, Hermione. I can't sit there and let them read it. We will do it together," she said fiercely. She dragged her thumbs across his cheekbones. "We will open the box. We will sit at the table. And we will translate the journals with them." "No." "Yes." She didn't let go. "Because if we don't, Rose will find a way to do it herself. And I will not let her read those things alone in the dark. She needs to hear it from us. From you." Draco opened his eyes. He looked at her. He looked at the fierce, unyielding light in her brown eyes. The same light that had dragged him out of the darkness 20 years ago. He was so tired of fighting. He was so tired of carrying the fear. "I hate it when you're right." Draco breathed. The fight drained out of him all at once. He slumped forward, resting his forehead against hers. "I know," Hermione murmured. She slid her arms around his neck, holding him close in the cold, damp cellar. "If Scorpius stops talking to me," Draco muttered against his skin, his voice thick, "I am filing for divorce. If Scorpius stops talking to you, I will ground him until he is 30, Hermione replied. Draco let out a harsh, broken breath that might have been a laugh. He wrapped his arms around her waist, burying his face in her neck, holding onto her like she was the only solid thing left in the world. He yielded. He always yielded to her. Fine. Draco whispered. We tell them. Together. Together, Hermione promised. They stood there in the dark for a long time, the black iron box sitting untouched on the crate beside them. It was open now, even if the latches were still locked. The truth was out, and there was no putting it back. Part 3. The translation. The heavy iron box sat on the center of the dining table. It didn't look like an artifact of a brutal war. It just looked like an old, battered piece of luggage. But Draco knew exactly what it was. It was a coffin for the man he used to be. The dining room was silent. The afternoon sun had faded, replaced by the warm, flickering light of the enchanted chandelier. It didn't feel warm. The air was thick and heavy, pressing down on all four of them. Scorpius and Rose sat on one side of the table. They weren't fighting over food. They weren't slouching. They sat perfectly straight, their eyes fixed on the black iron. Hermione sat on the other side. She had changed out of her ministry robes into a soft, oversized cashmere jumper. It made her look smaller, softer. Draco stood at the head of the table. He was still wearing his suit jacket, though he had discarded the tie. He felt like he was facing a firing squad. The sequence requires 3 drops of blood. Draco said. His voice was completely devoid of emotion. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't want to give himself the chance to back out. He drew his wand, made a swift, shallow cut across his index finger, and pressed it against the center latch. The iron hissed. A faint plume of purple smoke curled into the air. Click! 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 The latches disengaged. Draco pulled his hand back, healing the cut with a muttered charm. He looked at Hermione. We don't have to do this, his eyes begged. We do, hers answered. She reached forward and opened the lid. It didn't creak. It opened smoothly, revealing the contents. 6 leather-bound journals. A stack of folded parchment. And a small, tarnished silver dagger. Rose leaned forward, her eyes wide. What's the dagger for? Blood-locked letters, Hermione said practically, pulling out the first journal. It was bound in dark green dragonhide. The Death Eaters used it. Draco had to match their methods so they wouldn't get suspicious. She placed the journal on the table. The cover was blank. They're encrypted. Draco said, taking his seat slowly. He felt like his bones were made of lead. A variation of the Protean charm, overlaid with a cipher I designed in my 6th year. How do we read it? Scorpius asked. His voice was a whisper. With this. Hermione tapped the cover with her wand. She murmured an incantation that sounded like Old Latin, twisted and sharp. The blank leather rippled. Ink bled to the surface, forming jagged, frantic handwriting. Draco's stomach plummeted. He recognized the date at the top of the page. November 14th, 1997. He had been 17. Terrified. Living in a house full of monsters. Hermione didn't hesitate. She started to read. The Carrows took a first year today, she read aloud. Her voice was steady, but there was a tightness around her mouth. I told them I needed her for a detention. They laughed, but they let her go. I made her scrub the dungeon floors for 4 hours so they wouldn't ask questions. Her hands bled. It was better than the alternative. Rose inhaled sharply. Scorpius looked at his father. Really looked at him. You made a first-year bleed? Yes. Draco said. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain that the alternative was the Cruciatus Curse. The words were right there. He had written them. Read the next entry. Hermione instructed gently. She wasn't looking at the kids. She was looking at the book. She tapped the page. The text shifted. November 18th. Hermione read. The Order is moving the safe house in Kent. They don't know it's compromised. Yaxley has a team waiting. I have to get a message to Granger. If she dies in that raid, this is all for nothing. If I get caught sending the Patroness, the Dark Lord will kill my mother. Silence fell over the table. Heavy. Absolute. Rose looked up from the book. She looked at Draco. The anger in her eyes was gone, replaced by something much worse. Pity. You sent the warning, Rose whispered. He did. Hermione said. She reached out. Under the table, where the children couldn't see, she found Draco's hand. Her fingers laced through his. She squeezed hard. Draco gripped her hand back. It was the only thing keeping him in the chair. It wasn't enough, Draco said. His voice was hollow. They still lost 3 people in the evacuation. But they didn't lose 20, Hermione countered fiercely. Because of you. I was a coward, Granger. You were 17, she snapped back. And you were playing a game against a madman in your own home. She tapped the book again. December 2nd, she read. The steadiness in her voice faltered, just for a second. They brought prisoners to the manor. I had to watch. I couldn't look away, or she would have known I cared. Bellatrix. She watches me all the time. I have to laugh when they scream. Scorpius pushed his chair back. The wooden legs scraped loudly against the marble floor. Scorpius? Hermione asked. I need water, he said. He didn't look at them. He stood up and walked quickly out of the room, heading toward the kitchen. Draco felt a physical pain in his chest, sharp and agonizing. He pulled his hand out of Hermione's grip. Stop, Draco said. He reached across the table and slammed the journal shut. Draco, I said stop. He stood up. His chair didn't scrape. It tipped backward and hit the floor with a crash. I told you they couldn't handle it. They need to know the truth. The truth is that I stood there and laughed while people were tortured in my drawing room. Draco roared. The carefully constructed mask was gone entirely. He was shaking. Do you want him to hear about the night you were brought in? Do you want him to read the entry where I described the sound you made when she carved into your arm? Rose gasped. She looked horrified. Draco flinched as if he had been struck. He had forgotten she was sitting there. He looked at his daughter, saw the fear in her eyes, and hated himself more than he ever had in his life. Draco, Hermione said. She stood up. She didn't yell. She moved around the table, ignoring the fallen chair. I'm done, Draco breathed. He backed away from her. I'm not doing this. You read them if you want. Tell them what a monster their father was. He turned and walked out of the room. He didn't go to the kitchen. He went straight out the French doors, into the cold, dark gardens. The night air was freezing, but he didn't care. He walked until he reached the edge of the wards, where the manicured lawns gave way to the wild forest. He stopped there, leaning heavily against the trunk of an ancient oak tree. He couldn't breathe. His chest was tight. The phantom weight of a dark mark that had faded years ago burned on his forearm. He had lost them. Scorpius walking out. Rosie's horrified gasp. He had spent 20 years building this family, and it had taken 20 minutes to destroy it. The crunch of footsteps on the frosted grass made him stiffen. He didn't turn around. He didn't have to. Go back inside, Hermione. It's freezing. You don't have a coat, she replied. She stepped up behind him. She didn't say anything else. She just wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, pressing her face against his back. Draco squeezed his eyes shut. He let his head fall back against the tree trunk. He couldn't even look at me. Draco whispered. He was overwhelmed, Hermione said softly. Her voice was muffled against his shirt. He is 15, Draco. He has never known a world where people are tortured in their own homes. That is a good thing. That is what you gave him. I gave him a lie. You gave him safety. And now you are giving him the truth. He hates me. He doesn't. Hermione stepped around to face him. The moonlight caught the silver threads in her curls. She looked up at him, her expression fierce and uncompromising. He came back into the dining room 2 minutes after you left. He asked where you went. Draco's throat worked. And what did you tell him? I told him that you were the bravest man I have ever known, Hermione said. And that sometimes, bravery means doing terrible things so that the people you love can survive. Draco let out a broken breath. He reached out, pulling her against him. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of vanilla and parchment. I can't lose them, Granger. You aren't going to lose them. She wrapped her arms around his neck, holding him as tightly as she could. They are your children. They have your stubbornness and my logic. They will figure it out. I'm terrified. I know. She pressed a kiss to the side of his neck. Me too. But we aren't doing it alone. He held her there in the freezing garden for a long time. The cold seeped into his bones, but the warmth of her body against his was an anchor. She was his anchor. She always had been. Tomorrow, Draco finally murmured against her skin. We read the rest tomorrow. Tomorrow, Hermione agreed. She pulled back just enough to look at him. She reached up and smoothed his collar, even though he didn't have a jacket on. Let's go inside, she said. Your lips are turning blue. You're ruining the dramatic brooding, Granger. Her mouth twitched. A tiny, fleeting smile. I've been ruining your dramatic brooding for 20 years. Thank God for that. Draco leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't frantic or desperate. It was deep and slow and entirely grounded. It was a promise that they had survived worse, and they would survive this. He pulled back, his hand lingering on her waist. If he starts looking at me the way Potter used to. Draco muttered, I am sending him to Durmstrang. You wouldn't dare, Hermione said softly. You love having him close too much. I have a reputation to maintain. Your reputation is currently shivering in a rose garden, she pointed out. Come inside. When they walked back into the manor, the iron box was still on the table. But it didn't look quite as terrifying anymore. Part 4. The worst truth. The next evening, the iron box was still sitting exactly where they had left it. Draco had spent the entire day at the ministry in a state of cold, detached efficiency. He signed legislation. He dismantled a bureaucratic oversight committee with 3 sharp sentences. He was the picture of Malfoy composure. Inside, he was waiting for the executioner's axe to fall. When he walked into the dining room that night, Scorpius and Rose were already at the table. They weren't eating. They weren't talking. They were just looking at the black iron. Hermione walked in a moment later. She placed a hand on Draco's shoulder as she passed him. A silent anchor. She sat down, pulling the Dragonhide journal toward her. Are we ready? Hermione asked. No. Draco said flatly, taking his seat. But proceed anyway. Hermione tapped the cover with her wand. The cipher untangled itself, the ink bleeding across the page in Draco's frantic, teenage script. She turned the pages, skipping past the minor entries. The mundane horrors. The daily terror of living with a madman. She knew exactly what she was looking for. She had lived it. She stopped near the middle of the book. The silence in the room sharpened. It felt fragile. Like spun glass. March 15th. Hermione read. Her voice was lower than it had been yesterday. The academic detachment was gone. They have Granger. Rosie's head snapped up. She looked at her mother's arm. At the faint, silvery scar that Hermione usually kept covered. I was running with Harry and Ron, Hermione explained quietly to the kids. We were caught by snatchers. They brought us here. To this house? Scorpius asked. He looked around the warm, brightly lit dining room as if the walls might suddenly bleed. Yes, Draco said. To the drawing room. Hermione looked back at the journal. I couldn't breathe. She read, reading Draco's words. I saw them drag her in and the entire room tilted. Aunt Bellatrix recognized her. She separated her from Potter and Weasley. She used the knife. Draco closed his eyes. He didn't want to hear this. He had lived it. He had dreamed about it every night for 5 years after the war. I stood by the fireplace. Hermione continued reading. My father was watching me. He knew. I don't know how, but he knew that if I moved, I would kill her. Bellatrix. I would try to kill her, and then we would all die. So I didn't move. I stood there and I listened to her scream. Hermione stopped reading. The silence that followed was suffocating. You didn't do anything? Scorpius asked. His voice wasn't angry. It was devastated. He was looking at his father like he was a stranger. Scorpius. Hermione started. No, Draco interrupted. His voice was a rasp. He opened his eyes and looked directly at his son. His right to ask. I didn't do anything. I stood by the fireplace and I did absolutely nothing.
Why?
Rose asked. Her voice cracked. Because if I had moved, Bellatrix would have killed her instantly. And then she would have killed my mother, Draco said. The words tasted like ash. I had to wait. Wait for what? Scorpius asked. Hermione looked down at the journal. She didn't want to read the next part. Draco could see it in the tight line of her shoulders. Read it, Hermione, Draco commanded softly. She swallowed hard. She looked at the page. Potter and Weasley broke out of the cellar. She read. They fought their way upstairs. There was a struggle. Spells flying everywhere. Greyback had Granger against the wall. He had his hands on her throat. Rose let out a small, terrified sound. Read the rest, Draco said. He didn't look at his children. He couldn't. Hermione's voice trembled. Just once. Greyback didn't see me, she read. I stepped behind him. I didn't use a spell. Spells have light. Spells can be deflected. I used the silver dagger from my mother's desk. I drove it through the back of his neck. The silence in the dining room shattered. Scorpius pushed his chair back violently. He didn't leave the room this time, but he stood up, retreating until his back hit the wall. You killed him, Scorpius breathed. I murdered him, Draco corrected. The distinction was important to him. He was fighting Potter and Weasley. He was not looking at me. I walked up behind him and I slit his throat. He was a monster, Hermione said fiercely. She slammed the journal shut. He was a dark creature who killed children for sport. He was on my side, Draco said. He finally looked at Scorpius. He was an ally of my family. And I murdered him to save your mother. And then I let Potter disarm me so they could escape. And the others? Rose asked. She wasn't retreating like Scorpius. She was leaning forward, her hands flat on the table. The other Death Eaters in the room? Did they see? No. Draco said. It was chaos. The chandelier fell. Potter and Weasley grabbed Hermione and apparatted away. Then why are we reading this? Rose demanded. Why is this the worst part? Greyback deserved it. Draco let out a harsh, bitter laugh. It had no humor in it. Because of what happened after, Draco said. He didn't need the journal for this part. He had the memory burned into the inside of his eyelids. The Dark Lord arrived 3 minutes later, Draco said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees just at the mention of the title. He was enraged that Potter had escaped. He demanded to know how it happened. He demanded to know who had killed Greyback. Draco stopped. His throat closed up. The phantom smell of burning flesh filled his nose. Hermione stood up. She didn't smooth his collar. She walked around the table and stood directly behind his chair, resting her hands heavily on his shoulders. Tell them, Draco, she said quietly. I couldn't tell the truth, Draco said to his children. If I told him I killed Greyback to save Hermione, he would have realized where my loyalties were. He would have tortured my mother to death in front of me. So what did you do? Scorpius asked from the wall. I lied. Draco's voice broke. The iron control he had maintained for 2 decades finally snapped. I told him it was a snatcher. A man named Scaby. I told the Dark Lord that Scaby had panicked in the crossfire and killed Greybuck by mistake. Rose watched him. And the Dark Lord burned Scaby alive in the center of the drawing room, Draco whispered. The words hung in the air. Ugly. Brutal. Unforgivable. I stood exactly where I had stood when your mother was being tortured, Draco said, his eyes fixed blankly on the polished mahogany table. And I watched a man burn to death for a murder I committed. A man who trusted my family. A man who worked for my father. I sacrificed him so I wouldn't be found out. Scorpius looked sick. Draco couldn't take it anymore. The look on his son's face was exactly what he had feared for 20 years. It was the look of a boy realizing his hero was a monster. Draco stood up abruptly. He shrugged off Hermione's hands. I told you. Draco said, his voice ragged. I told you I was not a good man. He didn't run to the gardens this time. He just backed away from the table, putting distance between himself and the horrified faces of his children. Draco, Hermione said sharply. No. He held up a hand. He couldn't breathe. The walls of the dining room were closing in. They know. It's done. You wanted the truth out. It's out. He turned and walked rapidly out of the room, heading toward his study. He needed to lock the door. He needed to be alone in the dark. He made it to the study. He slammed the heavy oak door shut and locked it with a wave of his hand. He braced his hands on his desk, bowing his head, his chest heaving as he tried to drag air into his lungs. It was over. The sanctuary was broken. They knew what he was. The lock on the door clicked. Draco's head snapped up. Hermione walked in. She didn't ask for permission. She bypassed his blood-warded lock as easily as breathing. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it. Go away, Hermione. No. They hate me, he choked out. The tears he had held back for 20 years were finally burning his eyes. The mask was completely shattered. Did you see his face? Scorpius looked at me like I was Lucius. He looked at you like a boy who just realized the world isn't black and white. Hermione corrected fiercely. She pushed off the door and crossed the room. She didn't hesitate. She walked right up to the desk and grabbed the lapels of his suit jacket. Listen to me, Hermione said, her voice trembling with a ferocious, terrifying love. You are not your father. Lucius sacrificed other people for power. You sacrificed your soul for me. I let an innocent man burn. Scaby was not innocent. Hermione shouted. It was the loudest she had spoken in days. He was a snatcher. He hunted Muggleborns for gold. He brought me to this house to be tortured. He would have killed you, and me, and your mother without a second thought. It doesn't make it right, Hermione. Draco yelled back, his hands coming up to grip her wrists. It doesn't make it clean. It was murder, and it was cowardice, and I have to live with it every single day. And you have lived with it. She cried, pulling him harder against her. You have paid for it every day of your life. You have spent 20 years being the best man, the best father, the best husband I have ever known. Do you think I don't know what it cost you? Draco's knees practically gave out. He sagged forward, burying his face in her shoulder. A harsh, broken sob tore out of his throat. It was a terrifying sound. The sound of a man who had held a collapsing building on his shoulders for 20 years and finally dropped it. Hermione caught him. She wrapped her arms fiercely around his back, holding him up. "I've got you," she whispered against his hair. She was crying now, too. "I've got you, Draco. I'm right here." "They'll never look at me the same way," he wept into her shoulder. "No, they won't." She agreed softly, her hands stroking the back of his neck, anchoring him. "They will look at you and know exactly what you survived. They will know exactly how much you love us. Enough to burn down the world. Enough to let the world think you were the villain." He clung to her. He gripped the fabric of her jumper like a drowning man holding onto a lifeline. They stood there in the dark study for a long time. The great, terrifying patriarch of the Malfoy family, trembling in the arms of the woman he had damned his soul to save. And she held him. She held him the way she had held him in the dark corners of the Manor after the war, when the nightmares were too loud. She held him the way she always did, with absolute, unyielding devotion. Part 5. The Judgment. The Manor had never felt this large. Or this cold. It was Saturday morning. Usually, the weekends were loud. Scorpius would be complaining about his transfiguration essays while simultaneously eating half a loaf of toast. Rose would be arguing a point of magical lore she had read in one of Hermione's ministry briefs. Draco would sit at the head of the table, pretending to read the prophet while secretly cataloguing every detail of his family's existence. Today, the dining room was empty. Draco stood by the window, looking out at the frost-covered gardens. He held a cup of black coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. Hermione walked in. She was wearing the same jumper she had worn yesterday. She looked exhausted, the shadows under her eyes stark against her pale skin. "They aren't coming down," Hermione said quietly. She didn't pour herself a cup of coffee. She just stood near the doorway, watching him. "I didn't expect them to." Draco replied. His voice was flat, hollowed out. "I went up to their rooms. The doors are locked." "Of course they are." "I tried to talk through the wood. Rose told me to go away." Hermione's voice cracked slightly on the last word. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest. She said they needed time. Draco didn't turn around. If he looked at her, he would break again, and he had promised himself he wouldn't. He had spent his entire life being the weak link. He refused to be weak today. "They are terrified of us." Draco said. "They are processing," Hermione corrected. But the conviction was gone. She sounded as frightened as he felt. "They are terrified, Hermione. And they should be." Draco finally set the cold coffee down on the windowsill. The porcelain clicked sharply against the marble. "They thought they lived in a safe world. We just proved to them that the safety was bought with blood. My blood. Other people's blood. It was a war. It was murder." Hermione didn't argue. She couldn't. She had defended him fiercely in the study, but the reality of the morning light was brutal. The journals were still on the table. The iron box sat there like an unexploded bomb. "I'm going to give them space," Draco said. He finally turned away from the window. He walked past her, his footsteps echoing too loudly in the cavernous room. Hermione frowned, dropping her arms. What do you mean, space? I mean I'm leaving, Draco said. He didn't stop walking. He heard her sharp intake of breath, and then the quick patter of her footsteps following him out into the grand hallway. Draco, wait. What are you talking about? He didn't stop until he reached the master suite. He pushed the heavy doors open and walked straight to his wardrobe. He didn't use magic. He pulled a leather overnight bag from the top shelf and threw it onto the bed. Draco! Hermione caught up to him. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. What are you doing? I'm packing a bag, Draco said evenly. He pulled his arm out of her grip, reaching for a stack of shirts. I will go to the townhouse in London. I'll stay there until they decide they can look at me without flinching. You are not leaving. I am the variable causing the distress, Granger. It is a simple matter of removal. It is not a simple matter of removal. They are our children. And I am the monster in their story, Draco yelled. He threw the shirts into the bag. He didn't care that they wrinkled. You saw Scorpius's face last night. You saw it. He looked at me like I was exactly what the prophet said I was 20 years ago. A ruthless, cowardly Death Eater. He was shocked. He was repulsed. Draco turned back to the wardrobe. His hands were shaking again. He hated it. He hated the lack of control. I can't stay here, Draco whispered, his voice dropping into a frantic, desperate register. I can't sit at that table and watch them refuse to eat with me. I can't walk past their doors and know they locked them to keep me out. I will lose my mind. So you're just going to run away? Hermione demanded. She stepped between him and the wardrobe. I'm giving them the space they need. You are giving them abandonment, she shouted. Her brown eyes were blazing with a terrifying intensity. They are 15 and 14 years old. They just learned that the world is a dark, dangerous place, and your solution is to walk out the door. My presence is making it worse. Your absence will destroy it entirely. Draco stopped. He looked at her. Really looked at her. She was shaking too. Not with fear. With absolute, unadulterated rage. You think this is just about you, Hermione said, her voice dropping into a deadly, quiet cadence. You think you are the only one they are terrified of. Draco frowned, the frantic energy pausing for a second. What? I drove a silver dagger through a man's spine, Draco, Hermione said. Her voice didn't waver. I orchestrated the assassination of 3 high-ranking ministry officials in my final year of the war. I lied, and I manipulated, and I broke every rule I ever believed in to keep you alive. She took a step closer to him. Do you think they look at me and just see their mother? She asked, her eyes wet but furious. Rose told me to go away. Not just you. Me. Draco felt the floor drop out from under him. He had been so consumed by his own guilt, his own terror of being the villain, that he hadn't realized the blast radius had hit her just as hard. They hadn't just shattered the image of their father. They had shattered the image of their mother. Hermione. Do not. She warned, pointing a finger at his chest. Do not try to take all the blame for this. Do not try to be the sole martyr. We did this together. We built this family together. We lied to them together. and we will face the consequences together. I can't watch them hate you." Draco said, the truth finally slipping out. The roar, bleeding center of his panic. "I can survive them hating me. I cannot survive them hating you." Hermione just looked at him. The rage in her eyes fractured, dissolving into something heartbreakingly soft. She reached up. She didn't smooth his collar. She grabbed both of his lapels and pulled him down, forcing him to meet her gaze levelly. "They do not hate us," she said fiercely. "They are overwhelmed. They are angry. They are confused. But they are our children. And they love us. You're guessing. I'm knowing." She corrected. "But if you walk out that door, if you go to London and leave them here to process this alone, you will prove to them that we are exactly what the war made us. Fractured. Broken. Incapable of staying when it gets hard." Draco closed his eyes. The leather bag on the bed suddenly looked ridiculous. A childish attempt to run from a fire he had started himself. "We stay," Hermione said. It wasn't a request. It was a vow. We sit in the drawing room. We wait for them to come out of their rooms. We do not apologize for surviving, and we do not run. Draco opened his eyes. He looked at the fierce, unyielding woman holding onto his lapels. He reached up and covered her hands with his own. He didn't try to pull them away. He just held onto her. What if they never come out? Draco whispered. "Then we sit in the drawing room until we die of old age," Hermione replied without missing a beat. Draco let out a shaky breath. The panic was still there, buzzing under his skin, but the frantic need to run was gone. Hermione had tethered him. Again. He let go of her hands. He turned to the bed. With a flick of his wrist, the leather bag flew off the mattress and landed in the corner of the room. The shirts spilled out onto the floor. He didn't care. "Okay," Draco said. His voice was steadier now. "We stay." Hermione let out a long breath, her shoulders finally dropping. She stepped forward and rested her forehead against his chest. Draco wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her wild curls. He held her tight, grounding himself in the reality of her. They had survived a war. They had survived the Dark Lord. They would survive a Saturday in a quiet house. "I love you," Draco murmured against her hair. He rarely said it out loud. He usually just showed it. But today, the words felt necessary. A shield against the uncertainty of the morning. "I love you too," Hermione whispered back. They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the quiet bedroom. Eventually, they broke apart. They didn't speak. They walked out of the master's suite together. They went down the grand staircase, side by side, a united front. They walked into the drawing room. The fire was crackling in the hearth, casting warm light across the velvet armchairs and the heavy bookshelves. Draco sat in his usual chair by the fire. Hermione sat on the sofa adjacent to him. They didn't read. They didn't speak. They just waited. The hours ticked by. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed noon. Then 1 o'clock. Then 2. The house remained dead silent. Draco's legs started to bounce. He forced it to stop. He looked over at Hermione. Her eyes were fixed on the fire, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The fear she had hidden upstairs was starting to show on her face. The silence was deafening. It felt like a judgment. Every minute that passed without the sound of a door opening upstairs was another brick added to the wall between them and their children. By 4 o'clock, the sun was starting to set, casting long, dark shadows across the drawing room. Draco leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He buried his face in his hands. "They aren't coming," Draco said. The defeat in his voice was absolute. "They can't even look at us." Hermione didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "We just have to give them more time." But Draco knew time wasn't going to fix this. The journals were out. The truth was out. And the family they had so carefully constructed was fracturing under the strain. He didn't want to run anymore. He just wanted it to stop hurting. Just as the grandfather clock began to chime 5, a sound echoed from the hallway. Draco's head snapped up. Hermione sat perfectly still. It was the unmistakable creak of a floorboard on the grand staircase, followed by another. Footsteps. Draco's heart hammered against his ribs. He felt like he was facing the executioner all over again. He didn't know if he was about to be pardoned, or if the axe was finally going to fall. He looked at Hermione. She reached across the space between the sofa and the armchair. Draco took her hand. He held on as tight as he could. They waited for the door to open. Part 6. What remains? The heavy oak door of the drawing room didn't creak. Draco kept the hinges spelled silent. It swung open smoothly, revealing the dimly lit hallway. Scorpius stood in the doorway. Rose was right behind him. They were both still wearing the clothes they had worn yesterday, crumpled and slept in. They looked incredibly young, and at the same time, older than they had been 24 hours ago. Draco's grip on Hermione's hand tightened until his knuckles went white. He couldn't speak. He wasn't entirely sure he could breathe. Scorpius didn't look at his father. He looked at the floor, then at the dying fire in the hearth. He took a hesitant step into the room. Rose followed, closing the door behind them with a soft click. The silence stretched. It was no longer the deafening silence of waiting. It was the terrifying silence of judgment. "We read the rest of it," Scorpius said. His voice was hoarse. Draco felt his heart stop. "What?" "The journal," Rose clarified. She walked past Scorpius, coming to stand by the edge of the Persian rug. "When you left it on the dining table last night. We took it." Hermione sat up straighter. "You broke the cipher?" "We didn't have to." Rose said. "You left it active." Draco closed his eyes. Of course she had. Hermione never forgot to close a spell. She had left it open on purpose. She had known the kids would come looking for it in the middle of the night. "You read the rest of the year," Draco stated. It wasn't a question. "We read all of it," Scorpius said. He finally looked up. He didn't look repulsed anymore. He looked devastated. "We read about the dungeons. We read about what they made you do to the prisoners. We read about how you smuggled food to the Muggleborns in the cellar when the guards were drunk." "That wasn't bravery," Draco said automatically, the old defense mechanism snapping into place. "It was the bare minimum." "It was treason," Rose corrected. "If they had caught you, they would have killed you." "Yes." "And you did it anyway." I did it because I couldn't stand the screaming, Draco said, refusing to take credit for an ability he didn't feel. It wasn't heroism. It was cowardice. I just wanted them to be quiet. You wrote down their names, Scorpius said softly. Draco froze. In the margins. Scorpius continued, taking another step into the room. You wrote down the names of the people who died in the manor. Even the ones you didn't know. You wrote descriptions of them so they wouldn't be forgotten. Draco swallowed hard. The phantom ash in his throat was choking him. I couldn't save them. Draco whispered. I could only remember them. You saved Mum, Rose said fiercely. I let an innocent man burn for it. He wasn't innocent, Dad, Scorpius said. The use of the title had hit Draco like a physical blow. The boy hadn't used it since yesterday. Mum was right. He was a snatcher. He would have killed you. That doesn't make it clean, Draco insisted, his voice cracking. He didn't understand why they were doing this. Why they were defending him. He didn't deserve it. It doesn't make me a good person. We don't need you to be a good person. Rose said. Draco looked at his daughter. Her fierce, brilliant eyes were shining with unshed tears. We don't need you to be perfect, Rose continued, her voice trembling slightly. We just need you to be honest. The history books say the war was won by heroes who never made a mistake. But the history books are a lie. The war was won by people who survived. We didn't know, Scorpius added. He crossed the rug. He didn't stop until he was standing directly in front of Draco's chair. We didn't know how bad it was. You never let us see it. You weren't supposed to see it, Draco said, looking up at his son. You were supposed to grow up in the light. That was the whole point. But we are your children. Scorpius said quietly. We carry your name. We should carry your history, too. All of it. Draco couldn't breathe. The crushing weight that had sat on his chest for 20 years, the absolute certainty that he was a monster hiding in plain sight, fractured. Scorpius reached out. He didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around his father's shoulders and pulled him into a fierce, awkward hug. Draco let go of Hermione's hand. He reached up, grabbing a fistful of Scorpius's jumper, burying his face in his son's shoulder. He held onto the boy like he was drowning. I'm sorry. Draco choked out. It was the only thing he could think to say. I'm so sorry. You don't have to be, Scorpius whispered. Rose didn't wait. She crossed the room and threw her arms around Hermione, burying her face in her mother's neck. Hermione let out a ragged sob, wrapping her arms tightly around her daughter, rocking her back and forth. The silence in the drawing room wasn't cold anymore. It was warm. It was the sound of a family breaking apart and stitching itself back together, stronger at the seams. They stayed like that for a long time. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting golden light over the four of them. Eventually, Scorpius pulled back. He wiped roughly at his eyes, looking entirely too much like his father trying to maintain his composure. So, Scorpius said, his voice thick. Are there more journals? Draco looked up. He wiped his own face, not caring that his aristocratic mask was completely destroyed. There are 5 more, Draco said. Do we get to read them? Rose asked, pulling back from Hermione. Draco looked at Hermione. She was smiling. It was a watery, exhausted smile, but it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Yes," Draco said, his voice steady for the first time in 2 days. "You get to read all of them. Together." "Good," Rose said. She sniffled, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Because the handwriting in the first one is atrocious. I hope it gets better." Draco let out a startled, genuine laugh. It felt strange in his throat, but it felt right. "It doesn't." Hermione offered helpfully. "He writes like a panicked Kneasel. I was under a significant amount of stress." Draco defended smoothly, the old, familiar banter slipping back into place. "You were always under stress," Hermione countered. "I was dating you. It was a chronic condition." Scorpius groaned. "Please tell me the other journals aren't just you two pining over each other in secret." "There is a substantial amount of pining," Draco admitted. "I'm going back to bed." Scorpius announced, though the corner of his mouth was twitching. "Me too," Rose agreed. "I am emotionally compromised and require pancakes when I wake up. Not oat things. Actual pancakes. I will inform the kitchen," Draco promised. "And perhaps we can burn the oat things in a ceremonial fire on the lawn." "I would support that," Rose said solemnly. "I'll bring the matches," Scorpius agreed. The kids turned and walked out of the drawing room. They didn't run. They didn't look back with fear. They just walked upstairs, leaving the heavy oak door cracked open behind them. Draco sat in his armchair. He stared at the open doorway for a long time. The executioner's axe had fallen. And it had missed. He leaned back, resting his head against the velvet chair. He felt lighter than he had in 2 decades. The phantom burning of the dark mark on his arm was completely gone. The ghosts in the cellar were finally quiet. For the first time since the war ended, he didn't feel like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop. He just felt like a father. Hermione moved. She stood up from the sofa, walked over to his chair, and climbed directly into his lap. Draco didn't hesitate. His arms wrapped around her waist instantly, pulling her close. She rested her head on his shoulder, curling her legs up beside him. It was a tight fit in the armchair, but neither of them cared. "You left the cipher open," Draco murmured against her hair. "I might have accidentally forgotten to close it." Hermione replied, her voice incredibly soft. "You never forget to close a spell, Granger." It was a highly stressful evening. Draco smiled. He turned his head, pressing a long, lingering kiss to the side of her neck. "Thank you." He whispered against her skin. He wasn't just thanking her for leaving the journal open. He was thanking her for stopping him from leaving. For standing between him and his darkest memories. For looking at the absolute worst parts of his soul and choosing to build a life with him anyway. "You don't ever have to thank me for them," Hermione said, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "They are ours. I know. And you don't ever have to pack a bag again." Draco's arms tightened around her waist. "I'm not going anywhere." He promised. The fierce, unyielding devotion in his voice matched hers perfectly. "Not ever." Hermione tilted her head up. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The fear was gone from her brown eyes. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it was a profound, incandescent warmth. They had walked through the fire again, and this time, they had brought their children through it intact. She didn't smooth his collar. She just leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't a desperate kiss. It wasn't frantic or panicked. It was slow and deep and completely triumphant. It was the kiss of a woman who had fought a war for the man she loved and had finally, absolutely, won. Draco kissed her back, his hand tangling in her wild curls, anchoring her to him just as fiercely as she had anchored him. The manor was quiet around them. But it wasn't the silence of secrets anymore. It was the silence of a house that had finally settled. A house built on ash, standing strong in the morning light. What the fire remembers, it changes. But what survives the fire is unbreakable. The end.